I finally got to a point when I just had to realize that, I have to let it go, and I just have to do my best work that I can. And I said, that's good, because in our classrooms every day we make mistakes, and we want to provide that environment for kids to let them know it's okay to make a mistake. So we're all fumbling with new technologies, and I've been on a lot of Zooms, but prior to a month ago, I had never been on to more than 2 Google Meets. All right. And now I spend 5 to 6 hours a day on them. And so, the world continues to shift. For my 20th year in St. Louis Park, we thought we'd try something new called distance learning. I am grateful to all of you for taking the great care of your kids that you are, for partnering with us. I'm grateful to our children for being the amazing 514 beautiful, gifted creatures that they are, and I'm also grateful to our school team, who has really had to look at things differently, and as you all know, and as we continue to grapple with what does this all mean on a personal, professional, global level. So some of you might be aware that I lived in Spain and spent quite a bit of time going back and forth. So going back and forth across the pond. And getting some feedback. Does anyone by chance have a microphone on? There we go. And so if you've been in my office at PSI, right outside the door, I have Don Quixote, right? And Sancho Panza, big poster. And so what I love about Don Quixote and Sancho Panza, for those of you that maybe aren't as familiar with the story, is that this guy, so it was written in the 1600s by a guy named Cervantes. This guy went around fighting windmills, right? And the reason why he went around fighting windmills is because he thought that they were big giants. And he had kind of what you might consider a vivid imagination. And maybe that's one of the things that I like about him, right? So some of the 3 themes that came out, some of the themes that come out of Quixote for me are imagination, commitment, and joy. And I'm trying to find joy, like all of you, in these moments right now. Joy in the little things, with my own child, with my family, trying to find, as a school, invigorating and recreating and committing to our mission, our district mission, as well as our vision statement. And so in the book Quixote, that one of the quotes that I've always appreciated that came out of it is, no hay libro tan malo que no tenga algo bueno, which roughly translates to, there's no book so bad that something good doesn't come out of it. So I'm choosing, like many of you, to find, the silver lining in all of this. I miss our kids deeply. I'm grateful for the way that our adults are finding ways to interact with them and forming relationships in a little bit different way, because our kids only get one chance at school, right? They only get one chance to be kids. And so as we continue to partner together to try and make this the most positive experience for all of them, as we're all going through our own insecurities, as we're all going through our own things that make lives difficult for us, right? I also miss the regular connections of just seeing the kids walking down the hall, spending a lot of time on Google Meets, like all of you and our kids. And, we at PSI and in St. Louis Park, we've always focused on social and academic, as well as the emotional, seeing the whole child, right? And we're also recognizing that we need to make sure that kids are okay from a social and emotional standpoint, to meet them where they're at, because every family and every kid is at a different spot right now. We need to honor that. We need to honor your family and where you're at. And for some of you, all of this is way too much. School distance learning is way too much, and for others, you're asking for a lot more, right? And so what we're trying to do is meet families where they're at. And so if you do have specific concerns or questions, I'm available to you. Feel free to call my office line. Feel free to email me. And also reach out to your classroom teachers, because with everything else going on in the world, we don't want schooling to be stressful, right? We want to meet you where you're at and connect with kids. For us, that's what's most important right now, is connecting, continuing to provide learning opportunities and activities, and continuing to push our kids in all 3 of those areas that I mentioned. I miss popping into classrooms, but I have had the opportunity of going into a lot of different classrooms. There's nothing quite as fun as watching kindergarten kids popping up and down. Been able to see some very fascinating and interesting things. Heard some rather funny things as kids are sometimes taking their devices into restrooms, sometimes leaving the room for a while and getting a snack, and then seeing the door slide open again and the stuffed animal pop up where the kid was. And you know, so we're all learning to maneuver, and it's life, right? And so we're trying to take things with a grain of salt too. There's a lot of things that you're probably wondering, and we just don't have the answers to yet. You know, we, like you, are monitoring the governor's calls every day, trying to figure out next steps. As of right now, May 4th is the date when we're tentatively scheduled to go back to school. You know, if that shifts, we'll obviously communicate that, but you know, we're continuing to watch what's going on too. You know, you might be wondering, how are we reporting all of this with student progress, and we have some things in place that we'll be rolling out here in the very near future. You might be wondering, you know, if we're, you know, how am I going to get my kids' stuff? You know, there's a lot of questions out there. You might be wondering, for those of you that are fifth grade families that have been with us a long time, you know that the celebration of learning and some of our spring events are huge deals for us, right? And you might be wondering about that and the loss, right? Grief, loss, all of this, you know. And so if we aren't able to be together at the end of the year, we are starting to put plans in place, as was referenced earlier by Kristen. You know, we're looking at how do we do things differently. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way we'll always do it. Doesn't mean it's the way that's always been done, but we do want to honor this time for our kids and for our community. And so just know that we're continuing these conversations, and, you know, especially early on, 5 minutes into, you know, the answer that I gave right now might have been different 10 minutes later, right? And so we're continuing to morph, and I just appreciate the collaboration and the grace that families are giving us, and I hope you're giving yourself that too. I'm going to say that again. I hope you're giving yourself some grace in all of this with your children and working with us, because it's a lot. So together we're writing this book. We're continuing to do what we've always tried to do, and that's be the very best immersion school that we can be within St. Louis Park, within our St. Louis Park community, to uphold the mission and the values, and the core values of everything that we stand for as a community. And so what I am looking forward to, though, because our book isn't done yet, you know, so when we get back together at Cedar Lake Road at some point in the future, I am excited to see about the new tools that our teachers have been exposed to, and the differentiation that will happen, and because of some of these experiences that we've had recently. I'm excited to for us to relook at our routines and visions, and I think because of this experience, we'll all have seen things in a different light. And so I am excited for those pieces too when we do get back together. I thank you for venturing with us. Know that we want to partner with you. Not every family needs the same thing. Not every kid needs the same thing, just like we were in the building. And so just know that we want to be there with you on this road. Know that I am available. I'm going to give a shameless plug right now. It's going to come out La Prensa on Friday. But if anyone wants to have coffee with me from 7:15 to 8 o'clock on Friday morning, I'm going to be online. There'll be a link. You can pop in. We can do this virtually. All right. If you do Q&A, or if you just want to look at the birds out the window with me, feel free to do so. So I'll be online from 7:15 to 8 on Friday if anyone wants to join. So please take care. Please give your kids a hug for me. Know that we miss them very much. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our middle school colleagues, Jason Bull, who is our assistant principal, also a familiar face at PSI. I'll let him speak to that, and Gladys Romero, who I had the pleasure of hiring many years ago when I worked at the former junior high. And they're going to speak to the immersion program, what happens after PSI, as well as talk a little bit about our amazing middle school and opportunities that are provided because of it. And so Jason is going to go into presentation mode, and I'll be monitoring the chat section if anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Corey. Corey, can you see the present mode? Just making sure I'm
I am not seeing it yet.
All right.
Can anyone else see it? I can see your faces if you want to nod or.
All right, I think I got it now.
There we go.
There we go. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Corey, for the intro. My name is Jason Bull. I'm also a PSI parent, and just a little bit about kind of my story, my family story. We lived in St. Louis Park from 2002 to 2010, and in 2010 we had kind of outgrown the house that we were currently in, but really couldn't afford to stay in St. Louis Park, so we moved out to the suburbs and kind of instantly missed it. But when it came time for our oldest to start kindergarten, there wasn't any way that we could send him anywhere else but St. Louis Park. And that included really a K-12 decision. Even if we didn't get into PSI, we would have been going to Aquila. My oldest will be coming to the middle school next year, so that will be an experience for both him and I. But just love everything that St. Louis Park represents, both as an employee, as a citizen, and as a parent of this community. I saw several current middle school parents that were already on this call, so good to see you. And I'll let Gladys introduce herself and talk a little bit about herself. But this is my 18th year. I student taught at the middle school. I was a math teacher, dean of students, and this is my 11th year as assistant principal, and continue to love working with 11, 12, 13, and 14-year-olds. Absolutely love it. And as Corey said, miss the action of the everyday middle school physical experience, because it's been very different the last month. Talking about the middle school, one thing that our principal, Les Bork, who's into his 30th plus year as principal, has really done a great job hiring staff that really just want to be middle school educators. So it's not people that are waiting to go to the high school, it's people that really love the middle school age and what that teaching experience is. We are an IB school, and the one thing that shows up that is a consistency for students and for parents, and for our staff, is that the language is consistent across classrooms. So one thing that you see is our grading is all done on a 0 through 8 rubric, which is very helpful. And in this time of distance learning was actually extremely helpful as we were trying to do kids in this way, because all of our teachers give feedback really in the same way. It's always through a 0 through 8 rubric and scale. Our kids know what that means. Hopefully our parents by now kind of know what that means when they see a 3 or they see a 5 on something. So that's a consistent thing that you will see all the way through the middle school. Everywhere in Power School, or any sort of feedback that a student gets, it's through that 0 through 8 rubric, which is part of what IB does, and that's some of the best practice grading stuff that we've combined as a school. That's one of the things that I'd look to as a strength of the middle school. We have several elective classes. All of your kids, if they're at the middle school, got to pick at least one elective, and in 7th and 8th grade, 6th graders have to take a music class, but then in 7th and 8th grade, they get to decide between an art and a music class. So there's choice that we provide our students all the way through the middle school. I love that the middle school is kind of that blending point where all 4 elementaries come together, and students that are, they play baseball together in the summer, but they go to different schools or play a different sport or activity, or even families that have been at ECFE together even before kindergarten started are reunited, and it's a great thing to see, and I think it's a great thing that the students look forward to. Kids that they know in the neighborhood and in the community, they now get to go to school with together. We have high academic achievement. We have our presidential award ceremony in the spring, and typically anywhere from 25 to 33% of our students earn that award, and that means that those students had an A- grade point average all the way through middle school, and scored somewhere in the 85th percentile in one of our standardized tests. But anywhere from 25 to about 33% of our students on a given year will earn that award. We still have a robust sports program, even with the start time change that Sarah will be talking about. There's many of our activities after school that are available to kids, and many middle schools around us have had to cut that in terms of budget cuts, and we've been able to hang on to that. Again, as the whole child and whole student is growing, more opportunity for them to kind of become that person that they're going to end up being. And also the sense of community. One of the things I'm most proud of as an administrator at the middle school is many times families come to us and they have not had a good experience. especially at the middle school level. I think the middle school age can be really challenging for everybody, for parents, for students. And many times we have kids that come to us that have not had a good experience. And I think because we have such a diverse, racially, culturally, however you want to look at students, students are able to find kind of a place of belonging for them. They're able to see, however they are able to see themselves and their surrounding students. And many times kids that have not had a great experience end up having a good experience at the middle school. That's one of the things I'm most proud of as an administrator, our school community and how our students are with each other. This is just a sample of like a typical 6th grade student that would come from PSI to the middle school. Gladys is going to go a little bit more into what our ESP classes really are about. And we even put some of the start time changes in terms of time, because our school day is greatly changing from starting at 7:33 to starting at 9:10 next year. But if you go just, and these are not, all these hours obviously are unique to an individual student, but we just put some classes here. But everyone would have a math class. Everyone would have a language and literature class or an English class. ESP Science. Science is one of the classes in 6th grade that PSI students take in Spanish. Everybody has a homeroom or an advisory class, and that's kind of part of our lunch hour. Next year, our lunch hour will be over the 4th period time. In the past, it's been over the 5th period time, but because of the earlier time, we had to move kind of that lunch up. So that 4th hour time always has an advisory every day, lunch, and their 4th period class that they have. Everyone has a design class. Design is part of the required International Baccalaureate classes that all students take. And students take design all the way through 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. We require all students to take a music class, and we had 5 choices that students get to pick from. And then in 7th grade, that they don't have to take a music, but they have to take an art or a music, but they get to have the choice starting in 7th grade. The ESP language acquisition is really the ESP Spanish class. They'll continue on in learning Spanish and the speaking, reading, writing, listening component of the Spanish language. And then every student has an elective every year, and they get to have that elective choice all the way through 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And they get to decide if they want to take a class that's similar or a different class that they want to explore. And then everybody has gym class as part of their schedule. And you'll see that some of those classes happen on an A-day, B-day rotation. And because kids from PSI in the ESP program, their language classes every day, typically they have 5 classes that they have every day. So they'll always have math, language and literature, science, individuals and societies or social studies, and that Spanish class. And they'll have 4 classes that go on that A-day, B-day schedule. They'll always have design, they'll have music or art, they'll have their elective class, and they'll have gym. That'll always kind of be their schedule all the way through middle school.
Jason, if I could, before you flip slides, if I could just interject.
Yeah, you got a question?
Some people might be wondering what ESP is, and it's not extrasensory perception, but rather extended Spanish program. I actually was in a meeting about 19 years ago when we determined that it was going to be called the ESP program. It came from the EFP program, which is the Extended French program in Edina. So that's where that comes from, ESP.
No, thank you for clarifying, Corey. And in meeting with the PSI PTO chairs, talking a little bit about some of the challenges of middle school, maybe, and there's definitely some developmental things that come, and it's hard to know. One of our old middle school site council presidents would always welcome parents, and her story was always that you kind of never know what to expect when your kid gets to middle school. And she had 2 boys, and her oldest went through, and she thought Scott would just breeze through, have no problems at middle school, and he really struggled at the start. And part of the reason is you go from really a homeroom setting into an environment where you have 10 different classes, 10 different teachers, and just the organization and management of that can be very overwhelming. And her oldest, who really breezed through elementary, did very well, really struggled when he got to middle school. And it put her at a just worrisome when her second child came through that was going to be the same experience. And when Daniel went through, he had no issues at all. And Liz was very just nervous about what it was going to be. She was calling ahead of time, having people prepare. And he had no trouble when she would have expected the exact opposite, just based on how her boys were, at least at that point, and what she was expecting from their middle school education. It was exactly the opposite of what she expected. But to know all the changes that come, and just to be prepared for what might happen in terms of adolescent development that kids go through. One thing that I can speak to for sure, the social component becomes such a important part to middle school students. Frequently, don't be surprised if your kid asks you to drop them off like 2 blocks from the middle school, because if you were even a block from the middle school and anyone saw you with them, that would be unacceptable. But that social component really kind of takes over and becomes such a more important part as they're kind of integrating, again, with all the 4 elementaries coming together, older kids now, and they're kind of the youngest coming into the middle school. But that social component is I think it takes on a life of its own a little bit. So don't be surprised by that. That's just part of what middle school is. There's a lot more, I'm going to say, anxiety that we see, and there's a couple of resources that I'd like to talk about that we offer at the middle school. We have a little more robust programming in terms of support for students because some of this stuff starts to come up more in middle school. We really want middle school kids to really be advocates for their own education and start to kind of manage their own learning as best they can. And obviously, as parents, you need to kind of manage how much you can be hands-off and be hands-on. Our students all have their own PowerSchool account. We really want them checking their grades as much as possible, checking if they have missing work, knowing that as parents, we still have to kind of monitor that. But we really want kids trying to grow into their own, be able to manage their own learning as best that they can. And we know that they're going to grow and develop quite a bit in middle school. Some things that we have at the middle school that I just want to share. So starting in 6th grade, we have a dean of students at every grade level, and that dean of students will follow students all through their 3 years. So Ms. Magnuson is currently our 8th grade dean this year. She will cycle back, start in 6th grade, and potentially be with those kids for the next 3 years. We also have a grade level coordinator at every grade level, and many times that person will also go through with them. And it's just nice that kids have familiar faces, they have resources and people if they need help. And as parents, you too can reach out to any of those people. The dean is kind of the main contact for parents. So if there's anything that you need, if it's a classroom teacher, go to the classroom teacher, but the dean can kind of help, can kind of be the point person for every teacher, student, parent, family in that grade level. So many times if there's anything that you need, starting with the dean is a good starting point. And we also have one school counselor and we have one school social worker. These are all resources that are available. Starting in middle school too, there's some of these programs that start in the elementary, but there's just a lot more mental health support that we provide our students at the middle school. And these are all the ones that really will fill up throughout the year because the need is so great. Now is a telemental health program that 2 days a week, if a student needs that, and that's kind of the right setting. We're very selective on to which program we might refer a student to. But there's like a psychologist at Park Nicollet. Our student is at our school, but virtually they're connecting virtually and doing some telemental support that way. That's 2 days a week that we offer that resource. Related counseling, we have a person that comes 3 days a week that meets individually with kids. They have their own office at the middle school, so they're almost kind of part of our staff, even though they're totally paid through by Relate. Move Forward is another partnership that we have to provide counseling. Growing Through Grief, anyone that has a significant family loss, Dana Esterbrook will come, meets once a week. This year she has 2 different groups that she meets with. Just another resource to help our students if they're dealing with any sort of a significant loss in their family. And then our social worker many times will run small groups, and a lot of times that's based on need. You can see some of the areas that we've offered in the past anyway. But all things that are available to kids, and as parents, just to know that there's always support that we have for kids depending on what they're going through. But know that these are all things that we offer at the middle school if they're needed. Here are all the things that, in terms of a transition, that we provide, at least have provided. Some of these you'll notice, obviously, tomorrow night was supposed to be middle school rally night. That is not happening. And this evening was going to be maybe a possible look into what we might be able to provide in terms of a virtual rally night. These are all the things that we've helped in terms of transitioning kids to the middle school. that we still hope to do in some way, but until we know for sure how long we're physically out of school. Our plan is to do something along these lines, whether it be virtual or physical, depending on how long we are in distance learning. So the only thing that we really had a date on was the first day of school. Still, that hasn't changed as far as we know. There's some pictures of our students, and now it's time for Gladys to talk a little bit more in depth about just the curriculum around our extended Spanish program.
Yeah,
So I'll turn it over to you,
good
Gladys.
evening, everybody. My name is Gladys Romero. I'm from Colombia, and I have been working for the district for about 13 years, and I also taught in Colombia for 9 years. So you are seeing kind of some pictures that I took from my former 8th graders who went to PSI to read the short stories project that they did in my class. So that's kind of an ongoing activity that we have that I have with my 8th graders, that they like to go to PSI and read the short stories, mainly for kindergarten to 3rd graders. One thing that I wanted to add about the characteristics of the 6th graders is that they are unique and they are energetic, they are curious, fun, sweet, funny, but they are also sensitive. And you are going to see that in 7th grade as well. They also are very independent, and they can advocate for their own education. I have 6th graders who are able to contact me in different ways, and I really appreciate it because it shows that they are curious and independent and they care about their education. About the ESP program, this is the continuation of the PSI program, and they are going out. The language is spoken. Spanish language is spoken in the classroom in science, individuals and societies, and language acquisition. So in science, they are going to see something like they are going to complete labs, readings, and projects on a variety of topics, including forces and motion, heat, light, and sound, etc. And individuals and societies, they are going to study the history of Minnesota and the history of St. Louis Park. They also are going to develop some skills in research and map skills. And they have ongoing activities such as readings and discussions on relevant current events. And that's a very important thing for them to do because it develops the critical thinking, which is very associated with our IB school. They are also taking the language acquisition class, which is the Spanish class, and they will be continue to develop the 4 skills: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. About the reading, we have developed 3 levels. In 6th grade, we have level 1, which is reading the books during class time. We analyze the book, we discuss the vocabulary, we discuss the content, and we want the students to be inquirers, knowledgeable thinkers, and open-minded when we have the discussions. We also teach the fun stuff, which is grammar, spelling, and punctuation, and we teach advanced grammar. So language is expected to be used from the students from the beginning to the end of the class with their classmates and with the teacher. We also have a rubric that the ESP department developed, and we use the same rubric to encourage the students to use the language, and we also grade it every quarter. I want you to know that the Spanish immersion program goes from kindergarten to 12th grade. So they start a strong program at the PSI, and then they go to the middle school where they take the science in 6th grade, individuals and societies in 6th, 7th, and 8th, and language acquisition. But the language acquisition class goes until 12th grade. So I want you to know that the program is well organized, and the middle school and the high school are connected with this program. We get together often and discuss about some things that we need to improve or how things are going. But it is a very strong program, I would say. I'm a native Spanish speaker, and I can say that the Spanish immersion program that St. Louis Park is a very strong one. Okay, well, I want you to know that the students may elect to take a second language, but that's an elective, and it can be a language acquisition class such as French or German. That's a great opportunity for them to learn a different language, and if they are going to choose French or German, they will continue taking it until 8th grade. And that's a quote that one of my former students wrote many years ago. Yeah, education is one thing. Being able to learn and understand it in 2 languages opens the door for many more opportunities. So Olivia Mobley, if you remember her or if you know her, yeah. So we also have the Amity program. We called it a Global Interns program because the program is developed in different ways. We get 2 global interns, mainly from Spain and from Colombia, and they help us in different classes. For example, they can help in a math class or EL class or SPED class or a French class. It depends of the teacher's needs. But they also help in our ESP Spanish classes. We are looking for 2 families, and if you are familiar with Carita Bentley, she is our coordinator. And so far, we have for next year we have one Amity who is from Spain, and we are waiting for the answer from another Amity from Colombia who we interviewed last week. So we are looking for 4 host families for next school year.
Thanks, Gladys. And we just wanted to share our contact information in case anyone wanted to reach out individually to us if you had any questions. There is going to be a Q&A part at the end of just this if there's any questions that we can answer. I also just wanted to show our middle school is under significant construction, was all school year, and we have at least 1 full school year to go the next 2 summers, and hopefully next summer, not this coming, but the following summer, so a year and change out, all the construction hopefully will be done. But this is our brand new media center. So this media center has not even opened yet. Students have not been in there. They're still actually putting it together in terms of really the final pieces, the furniture. So you'll see there's no books on any of the bookshelves or anything, but our media center is pretty much completed. And part of this, there was also about 7 classrooms added to the 2nd floor. So if you look on the picture on the left, that's the media center portion that will be on 1st floor. 2nd floor will be a lot of classrooms that are surrounding it. There's a beautiful staircase it's kind of right in the middle. But really just very exciting, just having an older building and having some spaces that are going to be newer and modern is very exciting. I wanted to show a couple renderings of what will be coming down the road. This will be what the front of the school is supposed to look like. If you look at the left of this picture, if you've been to the middle school now, that is actually the current turnaround right there. So the front of our school is going to extend out. I mean, it's at least probably 50 feet from what it is now, but it's going to be almost all the way to the turnaround. That's how far out that the building's going to be. And that's going to be some front offices on the right-hand side, an orchestra classroom on the left, and then the entire performing arts space that there's a couple pictures of. So this is when you come into the school, really what the entrance will be. The performing arts space will be on the left. Straight ahead will be into the school. And on the right will be kind of more of our front offices. And here's a picture of what inside the performing arts space is supposed to look like. But we're just very, very excited about being able to have our kids experience these spaces when they're done. Even though I could, you know, go without the living through the construction piece, because that's never fun. This is our cafeteria, so our cafeteria will be brand new. And our cafeteria right now is not nearly the size of this, so to have more space for kids to just, when they're eating, just to have more space to relax in, be very exciting. And then this is kind of a rendering. If you've driven by, there's not nearly that much brick. It looks like brick to me, but it looks much more modern because this is the part that is really almost done right now. But very excited to have all this get done, and very excited for kids to be able to experience these spaces as well as our staff and community. So before we go on, I know Corey texted me that there was one question about design class at the middle school, and our design class is a class that you take every single year. It looks different every single year, but it's one of the 8 required classes that the International Baccalaureate requires middle school students to take. And it's really a STEM type of offering. So really a science, technology, engineering, math type of experience. The design cycle calls for kids to kind of study a problem, plan to act on it, build something that would potentially provide a solution to the problem, and then actually do it, and then go back and see how the plan that you executed, how did it work? But that you do every single year. And it's a different experience every single year. So in 6th grade, it's a very heavily in visual art and taught by more of our art teachers. And then in 7th grade, it goes into more of a technology education experience. That's in one of our synergistic labs. And then in 8th grade is some computer coding, some bridge building, a lot of more hands-on type of learning. But that's what our design class throughout 6th, 7th, and 8th kind of looks like. So I'll just pause in case there's any other questions that Corey got.
Not yet, but they're all looking very intently.
I would like to add about the Library Media Center that it is a great resource for the students. That in addition to the computers, we have over 1,600 Spanish books for students to check out. Just for the ESP families to know that we have resources available at the Library Media Center. And we also are building the French and the German library. So for now, we are keeping up the books, and Greg is doing a very good job updating and buying new books for the students to check them out. And we have some translations, but we have some Latin American authors for students to read.
Jason, question for you. What do you love most about working with middle school kids? I had the pleasure of working at the middle school for about 5 years, and I have a lot of fun stories, and a piece of my heart is still there. What do you love about it?
I personally love, just in my role, you know, if at the middle school, if kids make a mistake, they pretty much know right from wrong. So if they make a mistake, to me, it's just a great time to have a learning opportunity and a conversation with a student. But at the same time, students are still impressionable, and you can really, to me, still hopefully impact them. But I love the energy. You know, people say day to day is different. I think at middle school, it literally is minute to minute. I remember, you know, in the classroom, you could have a great lesson one, you know, second hour, and you think you got it down, and third hour, it's totally different. So just you just never know what you're going to expect. And I personally love that about my job, kind of each and every day.
Gladys, is there anything you'd like to add? I know we also have some middle school staff members I can see on the call.
I would like to say that for the intellectual part of the middle school, they look at the present. They don't look at the past or the future. The present is very important for them. Yeah.
For about a year and a half, I taught at the middle school, and I was in my mid 20s, later 20s, and I remember being at the overhead projector, which I still think is amazing technology, and was writing, and I bent down, and I had an 8th grade female student raise her hand and say, Senor Maslowski, you're going bald. And I said, thank you for noticing. Kind of, there is not a lot of filter, and yet that's part of the beauty and the joy of middle school too.
Yes, they are very direct. Yes.
I guess one of the things I appreciate about our middle school too is that we have so many opportunities for kids to connect, and you alluded to that, but just so many great opportunities for whatever the kids want to do, activities after school, and things that they want to try. There's plenty of opportunity for that.
And another thing that the district in general is doing is being part of the community. It is very important for them to think that they belong to a community. And we have different communities in our own building. For example, we have the community of the after-school activities, or the community of languages, or the communities of language and literature. So there are different communities within our building, and that's something that we are building. And I, as a person and as a teacher, as a Latina female teacher, I really appreciate that we every year are building that appreciation of being part of all the communities that St. Louis Park and the middle school is offering for everybody to join.
Yeah, and hopefully these spaces only just enhance that community and what we can provide. I think from an art standpoint, having our own performing arts space, and as part of that is a new orchestra space as well, where all of our music rooms are going to be more centrally located, because our orchestra room is on 2nd floor, way apart from our choir, band, guitar world, drumming spaces. So it's an exciting time to be at the middle school and have a kid or students that are coming to the middle school. And I hope you guys feel the same way as parents.
And I'm looking forward to us utilizing the amazing theater space that there will be. I'm thinking drama club and all kinds of other fun activities will be right down the road. So,
Corey, do you remember when we were writing down the curriculum for 7th grade that we added drama?
I do.
I still have that unit, and I love it, and I'm just waiting for that space to be open. I'm counting down the days, because I had my space, and it was stolen many years ago, which was the cafeteria. And now I have been waiting for that space, because I really want my students to enjoy, especially 7th graders, to enjoy that unit. So I'm just, hurry up, please.
Great. Wonderful. Well, friends, we are, feel free to keep asking questions in the sidebar. And Jason and Gladys are going to hang around too. But if you have questions, feel free to email them or reach out to them. I can also put you in contact with them. We're actually doing really well on time. We're about 3 minutes ahead of time, dare I knock on wood, where we thought we might be. And so we planned in a 7th inning stretch, if you will, being that we're not able to go to the Twins game. So if you want to take 30 seconds, I won't sing for you, but if anyone wants to do Cabeza, hombros, piernas, pies, we can definitely do that. But otherwise, we'll just take a 30-second stretch break. You need to grab some water or whatever as Sarah Thompson's getting set up. So. And I do want to give a huge shout out and thank you to our middle school colleagues for their presentation too.
You're welcome, Corey. I remember that when you were the coordinator for the Spanish immersion program.
Yes, I held many roles in the early years.
FLAP grant coordinator, right, Corey?
Yes, FLAP. We received a substantial amount of money from the federal government to coordinate the K-12 program. All right, so next up is my colleague and friend, Sarah Thompson, who's our Director of Communications and Community Relations. I was on a call because I meet with all the grade level teams at least once, if not twice a week, to talk about concerns, questions, as well as coordination across the school. And one of the things that we were talking about this afternoon, as when I was meeting with the third grade team, was we're used to starting relatively early at 8:25, and a lot of the kids are showing up in their pajamas right now and rolling out of bed. And so, like many of you who may be sleeping in a little extra or maybe not. Looking forward to next year. I am actually quite excited about the start time for elementary. I think that it's going to be great. Elementary kids, from my experience, are always ready to kind of jump in and get ready. And so I'm looking forward to having some extra time in the morning. But, we're not as dramatic of it as a shift as some of the other buildings. So with no further ado, Sarah Thompson.
Thank you, Dr. Maslowski. So this is going to be another little foray into interesting things with technology, because I'm going to present, but Jason's in charge of my slide deck. So this will be interesting to see how in sync Jason and I are tonight, to see how we do this. So as Corey said, I'm Sarah Thompson. I'm the Director of Communications and Community Relations for the school district. And the start times conversation is a natural fit after we talk about construction, because both came out of the 2015 to 2020 strategic plan for the school district. And right after we passed the referendum and got to planning for all these construction projects, then we just started the start times conversation. And so, Jason, if you can move us forward, we started the conversation around elementary start times was where we started the conversation. And so first we had a task force. Many of you were involved in it. I think I saw some familiar names. And we looked at all of the start times across the school district. And out of that came the change in start times. And I'm sure you're all familiar with that now. There were passionate feelings about it across the board. But we agreed that start times should change, and that fundamentally elementary and middle would flip, and high school would change slightly, is really what the big start time change amounted to. And then we have spent the last full year working on the implementation of those start times and really what that looks like. And so with that, there's 3 different groups that have been meeting to work on that implementation. And so there's been an elementary school out of school time task force that's been focused on child care and enrichment opportunities. There's been a middle school out of school time task force. That one's a little bit different, because that one has also been spending time looking at what does a teacher day look like. So a little bit more teacher focus at the middle school. And then there's a high school schedule task force, and that one's really spending a lot of time looking at the student day. So 3 different bodies looking at the schedule implementation. So I'm going to spend the bulk of my time tonight talking about elementary school and middle school, but I also wanted to just kind of give you a sneak peek of what was happening at the high school, knowing that eventually we'll end up there as well. So if we can go forward on that one. Awesome. So the purpose of the task force was to create a more robust menu of out-of-school time options to meet the overall health, academic, and social developmental needs of all K-5 students and families. So I think that's a really important place to keep coming back to, because it's really important to note that we're not just spending our time coming up with creative ideas, right? This isn't underwater basket weaving. This isn't, do I want to play kickball? This is really in alignment with our strategic plan, so that we're really crystal clear on what this is. So this is academic programs, enrichment and recreation, and childcare. So we're really specific on what this is and what this isn't. And that was designed intentionally so that the work stayed narrowed and focused. So that gave us permission to do things, and it also gave us responsibility to stay on track, right? So that's why there was charge statements for all of these different task forces. You can go forward, Jason. Thank you. So out of the out of school time task force came 4 focus areas: childcare, health and fitness, academics, and the arts. And what's really important about these, and if there's anybody here that was part of this work, you can speak to it just as well as I can, is that these were really the 4 areas that the group, this is probably 40 parents, staff, and even some students served on this task force. These 4 focus areas really are charged areas of what the after school time for elementary students next year and going forward, really what their time should, could, and will be focused on. So we know we need childcare, but beyond that, what does enrichment look like? Enrichment looks like skill building for sports. So not replacing youth sports that are very well organized in St. Louis Park, but providing some additional sport opportunities, some skill building, some club level sports, offering some enrichment around academics. Maybe it's homework help, some student interest clubs, maybe it's a math league, some targeted services around academics, and then also building in some fine arts, whether it's visual arts, performing arts, and some student interest clubs at the school level. So those were the 4 areas that came out of the OST task force. Jason, can you go forward? So what does this look like in terms of next steps? And so this was the work that was done by the task force. And then what happened was that got done, they threw it back to the district and said, okay, we've done our work. Now you need to figure out how to implement it, how to get it done. And so this really came back to not only the district, but to the principals. So Dr. Maslowski, his other 3 elementary colleagues, and this is what they're working on now. So the district's looking at how do we do transportation? So our elementary kiddos are going to get done with school. A large number of them are going to go home because they have parents at home. They have maybe an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent at home. But there's a chunk of kids that don't have a parent or another adult at home. And so we're going to need to look at potential transportation options if they're going to be involved in after school enrichment. And what does that cost? What does that look like? We're going to have to finalize a strategy to provide students with healthy snacks after school. So what are the snacks? Where do they come from? Are they funded through school nutrition, or are they purchased privately? Is that something we're going to ask parents to provide? What does that look like? We're going to have to look at childcare. And now, because there is a longer time after school, the superintendent charged the group and the school board, charged the group with looking at a 2-tier option, so that there's an option for parents who can pick up students after school at, say, 4 o'clock, and there's an option for parents who need care until, say, 6 o'clock. And so what does that look like? And then I was charged with a communication strategy to inform families of free after school enrichment activities. So what does that look like? What is available that we can offer for free, and what funding streams are available, knowing that we've got some families who will need some assistance in that area. Jason, can you go forward? So that was the elementary piece. Now we jump over to the middle school piece, knowing that we've got some parents here tonight who will be looking at the middle school going forward. So the middle school is now, remember, the opposite end of the spectrum, right? So they did have the early time, now they have the late time for next year. So they're looking at a different situation in that now they have an early morning time when they potentially have 6th graders at home by themselves. So potentially parents going to work, 6th graders at home by themselves in the morning, needing to get themselves to school. So that's the potential challenge window we're looking at for next year at the middle school. And so they also formed a task force. You can see them here. If you can go forward, Jason. I should have had a code word or a signal. So the purpose of this task force is to find the structures and systems of academic support and enrichment for middle school students and the teacher workday in alignment with the middle school day. So 9:10 to 3:52 is their window at the middle school. Can you go forward, please? And so this is what it looks like at the middle school. And they looked at several options and how this would come together. And this is the option they landed on. We called it the before school option. And Jason, can you explain how the Wednesday only piece works with the mini clubs?
Yep. So right now what we're thinking, so I guess I'll start with what we have now at the middle school. So right now students are able to stay after school with teachers and get academic help if they need to. Now, who stays after school or how frequently, it's up to teachers because it's technically teacher prep time. But most of our teachers right now will at least stay after 1 day a week if possible, unless they're coaching or doing some sort of other commitment. But we wanted to try to still have academic support for kids. What we found was moving later, though, we couldn't really do it in the same way. So transportation really became an issue with us going later to do it the exact same way. So we settled on this option that really on at least 1 day a week, all of our teachers would be at school and students know, and we're thinking it would be Wednesday would just be the day. That's not 100% for sure, but we're thinking right now that Wednesdays would be the 1 day a week that teachers would be able to help students. And if there were some clubs that we offer now, that would make sense to be about a 40-minute time slot. So it would really start at 8:05. But 1 day a week, all teachers would be available. Students could get help if they needed it. They'd be able to get on busing that day. So the transportation part would be, that barrier would be eliminated because busing would be available. What would happen is that you'd get on kind of the PSI route, so to say, most likely go to that school because PSI is a district-wide busing route. So our kids could get on wherever they would need to get on, go to PSI, and then transfer there to a bus or two that would take kids to the middle school. And that's the bus that would arrive. We have that projected to be coming to the middle school about 7:45 to 7:55. We still haven't figured all this out, what happens from 7:55 to 8:05. Our kid's going to go to a gym for a little bit, wait outside classroom doors, or we're going to supervise hallways. All that hasn't been totally figured out yet. Our last committee meeting was right before spring break when we were still kind of in this distance learning. Didn't really finalize this until about a week ago. So some of this still has to get worked out, but we're thinking Wednesday mornings is when that teacher academic help for students potentially could happen.
Thank you, Jason. And again, what's really been important and kind of a marker for the middle school work and the middle school task force is really that teacher help for students. Right now, there's a big chunk of dedicated time set aside for that. And it was really important for students and parents and staff that we didn't lose that in the transition. And so the group spent a lot of time and looked at a lot of schedules to figure out what was the best way to put the schedule together to make everything fit and stay true to the science around the start time changes, because that was the key of why we made these changes. And that was, going again back to strategic plan and back to construction of, why we passed referendum and why, we went through all of these different steps in the process, and why we had, been through years of work to get to this point, to do this work. So I think it's really important to kind of see the breadcrumbs that went together to get to these different steps, to be true to the process. So, Jason, can you hop us forward the next step? So next steps at the middle school, as Jason mentioned, a lot of this is only just a couple weeks old. And so we're examining the transportation options and costs. As Jason mentioned, we're looking at, is the piece of the PSI bus a viable option? What does that look like in terms of seats on the bus, cost, things like that. We're also considering, is there a before school, childcare is in quotes because we don't think obviously that childcare is the right term. Please don't mention it to your children because we know that they would not like that term for middle school students, but we also know that there's parents who would like us to consider that because we've heard, maybe not from any of you who are here tonight, but we've heard from some parents of, is there something that exists in the morning before school for sixth graders that would be available? You know, I've heard ideas that have come to me of, is it a supervised study hall? Is it a supervised, like a morning phy-ed? You know, is it a supervised morning like computer lab or library media center time? I've heard all three of those mentioned to me, but we put childcare in air quotes because that's usually something that people can understand pretty quickly. And then we're also looking at, it's called a memorandum of understanding in teacher contract language, because we would need to extend the teacher contract slightly to do that before school help and that mini club time that we talked about on Wednesdays. So we would need to do a little bit of work with the teacher contract on that. And so those are the next steps we would need to do there. And so that's the middle school piece of the start times. And so Jason, if you can take me forward. I'm going to go through the high school stuff really quick because what's most important about the high school stuff is that it is truly in its infancy. So the high school task force got started this year, excuse me, but truly has one more full year of discussion before it is ready for implementation. They're really looking at their entire student day, and do they want to be a 7-period day? Do they want to be a block schedule? Do they want to be a hybrid? What do they want to be? And at the same time, the current principal is going to step down, and they'll be getting a new principal. And so there's a lot of pieces to the high school that are in flux right now. And so, Jason, if you can go forward for me. Here's the charge. They currently have a 7-period day. Excuse me. As you can see, they're looking at optimal schedule, health, developmental, a lot of the same pieces. But what's interesting at the high school is that they're running with both IB and AP, some other college in the schools, and some other advanced type college credit programs. So there's a lot of different blocks to build together at the high school. And so it's interesting pieces to build together to build a program. What's really driving the schedule change at the high school is currently they have 2 days a week where they have a late start. And it's a late start for additional time for students to meet with teachers. And it's not necessarily always being utilized by students. And so we're looking at, is there a better use of that time? So Jason, can you go forward? So here's some parameters. High school will also be facing extensive construction from the referendum. Can you go forward one more time? And I don't know if can you blow up your screen a little bit more?
Oh boy.
I know, I'm asking a
Let me
lot.
try.
Wrong way. This is the start of potential blocking. You can kind of get an idea of what it could be. Maybe we won't chance it because we could.
Yeah, I'm not.
We could lose the whole thing. We'll just stop.
Sorry.
That's okay. Nope, no worries. You can kind of get an idea with the blocks of what it's headed towards. Bottom line is this: it has possibility. We need much more stakeholder input. For those of you who are heading to the middle school next year, we'll be seeking your input readily. For those who are going to be at PSI for a few more years, we certainly are interested in hearing from you, but you might not be ready to provide input yet or interested in providing input. That'll certainly be up to you. But this is something that's on the horizon at the high school. So Jason, if you can hop forward. And this is where we're at. And so it's really coming down to the recommendation is to move to a block schedule. What are the budget recommendations or budget implications of that? And then really it's comparing student profiles. You know, what does a student profile look like in a 7-period day? And what are the implications of moving that to a block schedule? And then we really need, as I said, again, some more stakeholder engagement and input around this, and how does that impact it? And then what does that look like to make that change at a time when we're doing major construction on the high school level? So that will certainly be another challenge. Jason, you want to move that forward? I think that was the last slide I had.
I think this is it.
Yep. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to take questions on this.
And while those questions are coming in, I'm channeling my father. He was a disc jockey in the 70s. So while those questions are coming in, I just want to give a shout out to Maida Webb too. We've heard referenced a number of times tonight about the great construction projects, and Maida was instrumental with the Vote Yes referendum campaign. So thank you, Maida. I don't know, are the plans coming the way that you had hoped?
I think so. I haven't had the opportunity to see all of the sites, but it was a fun process to be a part of, and I can't wait to see the finished product.
Thank you. Any questions? Otherwise, some of us can hang out on the call here near the end or at the end.
I don't see anything in the chat.
No, I'm not seeing anyone. So feel free to email any of us or to connect. You know, like I said, I'll hang out. And once again, coffee, 7:15. I can't treat you, but if you want to bring your own cup, I'll be sitting here, maybe even looking out the window if anyone wants to connect on Friday morning. So 7:15 to 8 o'clock. I'll have the link in La Prensa on Thursday. So I just want to, before I turn it over to our esteemed co-chair of PTO, Karen McCarran, I just wanted to say thanks to all of you for all that you do for our kids every day. You know, with Quixote, you know, there's our book is yet to be written, you know, as I keep encouraging our staff to think about, you know, what do we want to be remembered for at the end of this? And how do we continue to lean into what we know is right for children? And so I'm happy to partner with all of you, just like every day. Feel free to reach out if I can be of support. So I'd like to thank Sarah Thompson and Jason and Gladys for being here tonight, and thank all of you. So Karen, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Thank you, Corey. We appreciate your leadership greatly. We just want to say thank you to all of you for participating. We're thrilled with the attendance tonight, and just encourage those of you that couldn't, may know of other community members that wanted to hear some of this information. It will be available, and we are happy to continue to answer questions and get ideas as we move forward. But we appreciate you. We are all grateful for this community, and just know that we're here for you in this time. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll wrap it up. Bye, everybody.